Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a dusty California evening, where the grass crunches beneath tired boots and the moon hangs low like it's eavesdropping. The air smells like dry wheat and forgotten dreams, and the only sounds are the shuffle of worn soles and a man whispering to his friend about rabbits. That's right, we're sinking into the world of mice and men, a story so quietly devastating, you probably won't survive this with your heart intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. There's something beautiful about all of us winding down together across time zones. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Two men walk down a country road. The sun is fading, and the rustling trees seem to whisper secrets only the desperate can understand. One man is small, sharp-eyed, with sinewy muscles and a quick tongue. His name is George. The other lumbers like a child in a giant's frame, heavy in body and soft in mind. This is Lenny. They are traveling companions, though they seem mismatched, like a hawk paired with a hound. But what binds them is more profound than blood. They share a dream. George talks. Lenny listens, wide-eyed and innocent. George scolds. Lenny panics, forgets, pleads. And still, George stays. You begin to understand something crucial. This is a relationship laced with both responsibility and affection. There's frustration, yes, but underneath it all lies a fierce loyalty. George is all Lenny has in a world where men drift alone like tumbleweeds, rootless and weathered. As they camp by a riverbank just outside of Soledad, the town whose name means solitude in Spanish, George lays out rules. Don't talk when they get to the ranch. Don't mention anything about their past. And above all, remember the spot by the river. If anything bad happens, Lenny is to come straight back here and hide. The tone is gentle but firm, like a parent coaxing safety into a child too young to understand danger. The reason for this caution becomes clear. Lenny, despite his size and strength, has the mind of a child. He loves to pet soft things, mice, puppies, velvet, but doesn't know his own power. He often kills without meaning to, and that tendency has already cost them. They've been run out of weed, the last town they worked in, because Lenny grabbed a girl's dress. He only wanted to touch it, George says. But she screamed, and Lenny, confused and scared, held on. The image clings to you like dust. Yet amidst all this unease, a dream takes shape. It's Lenny's favorite bedtime story, and George tells it with the resigned rhythm of repetition. One day, they'll have their own land, a little farm, chickens, maybe a cow, and most important of all, rabbits. Soft, furry rabbits for Lenny to tend. He practically glows with joy at the idea, imagining his fingers stroking their delicate fur. George's voice grows soft. We'll live off of the fat of the lawn, he says. And it's not just a fantasy. In the unforgiving world of itinerant labor during the Great Depression, where men work for scraps and sleep under stars that never remember their names, this dream is a form of rebellion. A piece of hope clutched like a locket in a fist. And so they sleep. The fire crackles. Crickets hum. Somewhere in the brush, a rabbit stirs. And the dream of two men owning something, anything, in a world that owns them begins to flicker into fragile life. But notice this. Even in this stillness, there's an undercurrent of dread. The kind of dread that doesn't shout but lingers like smoke in the corners. Steinbeck doesn't lay out drama and fireworks. He lets it simmer, lets it creep. There's something deeply haunting about the way George tells Lenny not to drink too fast or not to speak to the boss. It's the same tone we use with children, but the stakes are so much higher. One wrong word, one wrong touch, and everything can unravel. And George knows it. He's carrying not just his own survival, but Lenny's too, and Lenny doesn't even realize it. George isn't a saint. He gets angry. He snaps at Lenny for losing a dead mouse, for forgetting instructions. He threatens to leave him behind. But in the next breath, he softens, ashamed of his cruelty. You can feel the weight he carries, the weariness in his bones. And yet, he stays. He always stays. And Lenny? He doesn't understand the full picture, but he knows he needs George. Not just for food or shelter, but for the stories. For the dream. For the voice that tells him he matters in a world that would see him as a mistake. As night folds over them, the wind shifts. The trees hush. And the two men, bound by history and hope, drift off under a sky too big to care. This is where it begins, not with a bang, but with a murmur, a promise, a plan, and a secret that's already unraveling, thread by delicate thread. The morning light spills over the dusty hills, golden and sharp, casting long shadows that seem to whisper warnings. George and Lenny rise early, brushing sleep and dirt from their eyes, the riverbank behind them now just a memory. Their boots crunch through the dry earth as they move toward the ranch, toward work, toward risk, toward a dream that glimmers and wavers like a mirage on the horizon. George is quiet, focused. Lenny, as always, chatters about the rabbits. It's a sort of verbal talisman, his way of holding on to the only thing that feels stable. He repeats the details like a prayer: alfalfa, pens, soft fur. George lets him talk, occasionally reminding him, sharply, if necessary, not to speak when they meet the boss. Lenny nods solemnly, then forgets and starts talking again. It's easy to think, at first glance, that George is simply using Lenny for his labor, or that he's tethered to him out of obligation. But it's more complicated than that. There's history here, and tenderness. Lenny's loyalty is absolute, his trust childlike. And George, irritated, exhausted, but ultimately kind, can't bring himself to leave Lenny behind. In a world where men drift and vanish and forget each other's names, these two hold fast. As they near the ranch, the buildings emerge like sun-baked bones, barren, functional, stripped of comfort. A long, rectangular bunkhouse, a barn, a harness room, a cookhouse, all of it smothered in dust and somehow already suspicious. They arrive mid-morning and are greeted not by warmth but scrutiny. The boss isn't happy they didn't show up the night before. George quickly steps in, speaking for both of them, spinning the story with practiced ease. He says Lenny isn't bright, but he's strong as a bull. The boss raises an eyebrow. It's clear he doesn't trust what he sees, especially a man doing the talking for another full-grown man. Lenny, coached to stay quiet, blurts out a few words. George covers quickly, but the seed of doubt has been planted. The boss's son, Curly, enters next, and if the ranch had a physical embodiment of trouble, it would be him. Curly is small, wiry, with tightly coiled energy. He walks like a man looking for a fight and watches Lenny with immediate suspicion. There's something about Lenny's size, his slowness, maybe, that sets Curly off. George notices. So do we. And suddenly, the ranch doesn't feel like a fresh start. It feels like a trap. Once Curly leaves, George turns to Lenny with urgency. Don't you even look at that guy, he says. If he tangles with you, we're gonna get the hell out of here. The warning is serious. There's no margin for error here. This job is supposed to be the bridge to their dream, a stake in their future. They can't risk blowing it on Curly's temper or Lenny's confusion. The bunkhouse is full of the quiet rhythms of working men. There's Candy, the old swamper with one hand and a quiet, weather-beaten face. He's the first to show them a shred of kindness, explaining the pecking order, the habits, the hidden landmines of ranch life. Candy tells them about Curly's wife, too. She's new, young, dresses too fancy for ranch living, talks too much, keeps looking at other men. Candy says she's trouble. You can hear the caution in George's breath as he processes this. Curly's temper, and now a flirtatious wife? That's a recipe for disaster, especially with Lenny around. When they finally settle in, Lenny is still worried about what might go wrong. George, trying to steady him, tells the dream again, like a lullaby, soft and slow. They'll save up money, buy their own place, have a couple of acres, some pigs, chickens, a little windmill, and of course, the rabbits. Lenny clings to this dream like a raft. But there's another layer to this repetition. It's not just for Lenny. George needs to believe it too. This story isn't just comfort, it's identity. It gives their wandering lives meaning. Something more than just sleeping in bunkhouses and eating beans out of a can. It's a vision of safety, of permanence, of dignity. The very things the Depression ripped away from so many. Yet the ranch crackles with tension from the start. Curly isn't the only threat. There's a sense that the place itself resists change. The men live with detachment. No photos, no books, no trace of personal warmth. Just work and silence and suspicion. They aren't friends, just bodies passing through each other's orbit. And George and Lenny? They break the rules by caring. There's something deeply moving in that. They don't have much, certainly not wealth or education or social standing. But they have each other. And that, in this context, is radical, almost rebellious. To care is to risk pain. To dream is to risk loss. But they do both, anyway. It's also worth noting the atmosphere Steinbeck creates here. Everything feels stripped bare, no wasted detail, no over-explanation. The land is both beautiful and brutal. The people, wary and worn down. And into that mix step George and Lenny, carrying their fragile hope like a lantern through a minefield. By the end of their first day at the ranch, nothing terrible has happened. But you feel it coming, like the air just before lightning. Static. Hushed. Lenny lies on his bunk, whispering about rabbits. George stares at the ceiling, already thinking 5 steps ahead. The plan is simple. Work hard, save up, stay out of trouble. But even now, you know, it won't be enough. Not here. Not with Curly watching. Not with the past nipping at their heels. Still, in the quiet, there's a glimmer. A dream. A piece of land waiting. And the promise that for once, maybe, they won't have to run. A few days pass, the sun rising and setting over the dry California ranch land like a pendulum that swings between hope and inevitable collapse. George and Lenny settle into the rhythm of ranch life. Early mornings, long hours in the fields, and evenings spent among men who mostly keep to themselves, their words brief, their eyes tired. Then, into this dry, masculine world of sweat and silence, steps Slim. Slim is different. He doesn't announce himself with bluster like Curly, nor does he slink around like some others. No, Slim simply is. He walks with an easy grace that quiets the room, and when he speaks, men listen. He's not the boss, but you'd be forgiven for thinking he was. He holds a kind of moral gravity, like a man carved from patience and quiet strength. And he's the mule driver. Handles a team like they're extensions of his own mind. His reputation precedes him, even in a place where men don't often talk about one another. George and Lenny meet him while working, and right away, Slim notices the way George speaks for Lenny. But unlike the others, he doesn't mock or question. It's more like he understands. His eyes soften, his words slow. He says, "It's a funny thing. I hardly never seen two guys travel together." And in that simple line, he acknowledges the abnormal beauty of their bond in a world where most men drift alone. George opens up more with Slim than with anyone else. There's something about Slim that draws truth from you like a tide. In a rare moment of trust, George tells Slim about Weed. Weed, where they worked before. That town still haunts them. George describes how Lenny saw a girl in a red dress. He just wanted to touch the fabric, feel the soft folds in his hand. But the girl panicked, screamed, and Lenny, in his confusion, held on tighter, not knowing what else to do. George had to pull him away. A mob formed. They ran, hiding in an irrigation ditch until night let them escape. Slim doesn't recoil, doesn't judge, just listens. And then he says something like, "He ain't mean. I can tell a mean guy a mile off." And it's true. Lenny isn't mean. That's the tragedy of him. He doesn't understand strength, doesn't understand fear. But he understands kindness, and he understands the dream. Slim also has a dog. A new litter of puppies, in fact. And when Lenny hears about it, his whole face lights up like Christmas morning. The joy he finds in petting soft things, it's pure, almost sacred. He begs George to ask Slim if he can have a puppy. George does. Slim says yes. It's a small moment, but it matters. In a world that offers these men so little comfort, a puppy is everything. For Lenny, it's like holding the dream in miniature, his own soft creature, his own small piece of tenderness in a world that otherwise confuses and punishes him. Then there's Candy, the old swamper, watching the days fall away like brittle leaves. Candy overhears George and Lenny talking one night in the bunkhouse. He hears the dream, a couple acres, a cow, chickens, and the rabbits. He leans in, listens harder. His voice trembles when he finally speaks. He wants in. Candy's old. He knows he's not much use on a ranch anymore. His right hand is gone. But he has money, $350 he received in compensation for his accident. He says he'll put in everything he has if George and Lenny will let him join their plan. And just like that, the dream gets closer. It's no longer a bedtime story or a half-joked fantasy between two wanderers. Now it has weight, substance, numbers on paper, land prices and time estimates. George does the math, as narrowing with concentration and disbelief. They could do it. In a month or two, they might actually do it. For the first time, George starts talking about the farm with real excitement, real stakes. Lenny claps his hands and bounces like a child. Candy stares at the wall, seeing something he hasn't seen in years, hope. But as with all things in this world, joy does not come without a shadow. Curly's wife, who doesn't even get a name in this story, keeps appearing like a wisp of trouble. Her face painted, her words dipped in sugar and spite. She drifts into the bunkhouse, into the barn, always asking about Curly but never really looking for him. She's looking for attention, for someone to talk to remember her as something other than a ranch hand's wife. A woman in a red dress with curls like cold questions. The men see her as a threat, because she is. Not necessarily in intention, but in potential. Her presence is danger to men like Lenny, whose understanding of the world begins and ends with kindness and fear. George sees this, warns Lenny again. Don't talk to her. Don't even look at her. But of course, life isn't that clean. Curly's already got his eye on Lenny, already sniffing for weakness. One afternoon, it happens. Curly walks into the bunkhouse, sees Lenny smiling, just remembering the dream, nothing more, and decides that's enough. Curly picks a fight. He lashes out with fists, sharp and fast. Lenny, frozen at first, takes it. Doesn't fight back until George shouts, "Get him, Lenny." And then as something snaps, Lenny grabs Curly's hand, crushes it. The room fills with screams. Blood. Broken bone. Curly falls back, howling. The men stand in stunned silence. Slim steps in again, the moral compass. He tells Curly, "You got your Han caught in a machine." It's not a suggestion. It's an order. Curly nods, teeth clenched, pride shattered. No police. No blame. Just silence. Later, George is shaken, angry, but also afraid. He tells Lenny again and again, "If anything happens, if there's trouble, go to the brush. Remember the riverbank." And Lenny, hands trembling, nods. But he doesn't understand what's coming. None of them do. Not yet. Still, the dream holds for now. They believe it. All three of them. Like kids whispering magic words before sleep. And for a little while, the world feels softer. The barn is quiet today. Dust floats lazily through sunbeams, dancing in the stillness like time has decided to slow its pace. Horses shuffle softly in their stalls, chewing hay, their ears twitching at flies. Lenny's here. He sits in the straw, cradling his new puppy. It's not moving. He doesn't understand why. He didn't mean to hurt it. He just wanted to pet it, like he always does. Maybe he got too rough. Maybe it was already weak. His big hands tremble as he strokes its soft fur, whispering to it, pleading for it to wake up. But it doesn't. And that fear, old, familiar, starts curling in his chest again. The fear of George finding out. The fear of messing things up. The dream. The rabbits. The little place in the hills. All of it feels fragile now, like smoke that might vanish with a breeze. Lenny panics. He buries the puppy under straw, then uncovers it again. Tries to make sense of death in a world where death never made much sense to him. He doesn't understand finality. Only punishment. And then he heals onward. A voice. It's Curly's wife. She enters the barn like a whisper that gets louder with every step. Her makeup is perfect, her dress too tight, her smile half invitation, half loneliness. She sees Lenny sitting in the hay, sees the puppy, and something in her changes. She doesn't run, doesn't scream. She sits. You can almost hear the moment crackle between them. A man-child holding death in his lap, and a woman desperate to be seen. She starts talking. And this time, she doesn't ask about Curly. She talks about herself. About how she could have been in the movies. How a man once told her she had the looks. Sent her a letter that never came. How her mother stole her chance. How she married Curly to escape, but found herself trapped in something even smaller than her parents' home. Her words tumble out in waves. She's not cruel today. Just sad. Tired. The kind of tired that seeps into your bones when you've been lonely for too long. Lenny doesn't really listen. Not to the content. But he hears the rhythm. The sound of someone reaching out. She notices his eyes, how they follow her hair. She lets him touch it. "It's soft, ain't it?" she says. And he touches it, gently, at first. Like velvet. Then a little harder. Then harder still. She jerks away, startled. And just like that, everything goes wrong. She screams. And Lenny doesn't know what to do. He grabs her. Tries to stop the sound. He covers her mouth. "SHHHH," he pleads. "George'll be mad." She struggles. He holds tighter. And then, she goes still. Her neck, limp. Her mouth, open. And in the sudden silence, Lenny begins to cry. He didn't want this. He never wants this. He just doesn't know how to be gentle. Not with animals. Not with people. Not with the fragile things he loves. The dream, remember the dream? The little house, the rabbits, the garden shatters into dust in that barn. Right then. Lenny flees. He remembers George's instructions. The riverbank. The place in the brush. He runs like a ghost, like guilt wearing a man's skin. No one sees him leave. And then Candy finds her. The old man, hobbling into the barn, looking for Lenny or maybe just a moment of peace, and he finds death again. The second time. First his dog. Now this. He gets George. The two of them stand over her body, the weight of the moment sinking into their shoulders. George's face changes, not surprised, exactly. Just hollowed. Like some part of him already knew it was coming. And here's the cruelty of fate. Even now, Candy asks, "What about the farm?" And George, tired, heartbroken, says it. "I think I knew from the very first. I think I knew we'd never do her." They know what will happen next. The men will find her. Curly will lead them. They'll blame Lenny, rightly in part. But it won't be justice they want. It'll be revenge. A mob. A bullet. George steps outside and joins the men, saying nothing about Lenny's hiding place. The scene turns feverish. Curly explodes in rage, barking orders, arming himself with a Luger. The other ranch hands, confused and frightened, follow. Dogs are called. Boots pound earth. Voices yell into the wind. A manhunt begins. Meanwhile, Lenny waits. At the riverbank, where it all began. He lies in the brush, replaying the dream in his mind. Talking to himself. Talking to voices in his head. His Aunt Clara appears. Not really, of course, just a ghost of memory. She scolds him gently, asking why he keeps hurting George, why he always ruins things. Then another voice comes. A giant rabbit. Yes, a rabbit. Towering and stern. Telling Lenny George won't come. That he'll leave him. That he'll beat him. Lenny buries his face in his hands, sobbing. And then, footsteps. Real ones. George arrives. And here's where time slows. Where every moment becomes crystal and unbearable. George sits beside Lenny. Not with anger. With love. With tragedy wrapped in silence. He tells Lenny to look across the river, to imagine the place. "We'll have a little house," George says softly, "and a couple of acres, and a cow, and some pigs, and live off the fat of the lawn," Lenny whispers, smiling. "You get to tend the rabbits," George says. Lenny nods, eyes fixed on the imagined future. And then, George raises the gun. It's quick. It's quiet. It's mercy in the shape of devastation. He kills the man he loves. Because he had to. Because the world would have done it worse. Because sometimes, in this brutal universe, the only way to protect someone is to end their suffering yourself. And as the sound echoes through the valley, the dream dies. Forever. The sun begins its slow descent over the Salinas Valley, casting long shadows that stretch across the golden fields. The manhunt fades into the background. The dust settles. The chaos is burned out, and what remains is quiet devastation. George stands alone. Slim finds him first. He approaches gently, like someone approaching a wounded animal. Slim doesn't ask what happened, not right away. He doesn't need to. His eyes take in George's trembling hands, the gun still warm, the hollowness in his gaze. Then George speaks. Softly. He admits what he did. And Slim doesn't judge. He nods. He understands. Because Slim has lived long enough, seen enough of this hard world, to know that mercy sometimes wears cruel disguises. They walk back together. Curly and Carlson catch up, boots heavy with triumph. They see George, gun in hand, and jump to conclusions. Curly, always itching for blood, asks if Lenny had the gun. George just nods. He doesn't argue, doesn't explain. Carlson, ever blunt, wonders aloud why George looks so shaken. And then that infamous closing line, slipping out of his mouth with chilling simplicity. What the hell you suppose is eating them two guys? And with that, the story ends. No justice, no celebration, just emptiness. You're left with an ache, a feeling that something fragile has been shattered beyond repair. But let's sit in this silence for a moment longer. Let's turn inward and begin to unravel what John Steinbeck has truly given us. Of Mice and Men isn't just a story about two drifters chasing a dream. It's an elegy, a requiem for the American dream, a mourning song for the millions left behind by economic collapse, war, inequality, and loneliness. It's a story that takes the grand themes of hope, freedom, and companionship and crushes them with quiet cruelty. Why? Because it had to. This book was born in 1937 during the Great Depression, a time when people were clinging to dreams like driftwood in a storm. Jobs were scarce. Poverty was normal. And yet, hope still flared in the hearts of men who believed they could carve a life from the dirt. George and Lenny represent those men. The dream they share isn't just about rabbits and land. It's about dignity, control, belonging. George wants to be his own man, to not answer to a boss, to build something with his own hands. Lenny just wants soft things. Safety, a place where he won't be punished for being what he is. And Candy, when he hears about their plan, wants it too. Not for the land, necessarily, but for the companionship. To matter. To be useful. Even Crooks, the black stable hand who has known nothing but exclusion, dares to hope when George speaks of the farm. For a brief moment, these outcasts, marginalized by age, race, disability, or poverty, find themselves united by a vision of escape. And then it slips away. Because in Steinbeck's world, dreams are delicate. And the world? The world is callous. Let's talk about Lenny a little more. Lenny is one of literature's most tragic figures. He's strong enough to kill, but too innocent to understand what he's done. He represents pure intention corrupted by a harsh reality. Lenny never wants to hurt anyone, but his strength, paired with his lack of understanding, turns love into danger. He's not a monster, but he's treated like one. And when George kills him, it's not an act of hatred, it's love twisted by necessity. George saves Lenny from a worse fate, torture, lynching, perhaps worse. But in doing so, he also sacrifices his own innocence. He kills not just Lenny, but the dream, the hope, the future they once shared. Now, let's talk about that dream. The little house with the garden and the rabbits. It's more than a fantasy. It's America's promise. A place of peace, of purpose, of ownership. But for people like George and Lenny, that promise was always out of reach. Because the system was rigged. The poor stayed poor. The strong preyed on the weak. And loneliness was a constant companion. Steinbeck's brilliance lies in how he presents all this without preaching. He never tells you what to think. He shows you. Through dialogue, through tension, through the silences between words. Take Curly's wife, for example. She doesn't even have a name. She's simply Curly's wife, defined by the man she married, not her own identity. But her monologue in the barn peels back the surface. You see the lost girl beneath the makeup, the child who wanted more, who dreamed of something better. She isn't a villain. She's a victim of circumstance, just like the men. And Crooks, segregated by race, living in a room beside the animals. He reads law books, not because he hopes to be a lawyer, but because they're the only things that can't exclude him. For a fleeting moment, he lets himself believe in George's dream. Then he retreats, because he knows better. These characters, lonely, broken, yearning, are the people history forgets. And Steinbeck remembers them. The structure of Mice and Men is almost theatrical. There are no chapters, just scenes. Each one unfolds like a stage play, dialogue-rich and tightly focused. The setting rarely shifts. The ranch becomes a crucible, trapping its characters together and revealing their fractures. This simplicity is deceptive, because underneath lies complexity, moral ambiguity, social commentary, philosophical depth. There's also symbolism layered throughout. Take the mice. At the beginning, Lenny pets a dead mouse in his pocket, soft and comforting, but also lifeless. Steinbeck borrowed the title from Robert Burns's poem To a Mouse, in which the speaker laments how the best laid schemes o' mice and men/gang aft agley go often awry. It's not just a nod. It's a warning. Nothing planned ever quite works out. Not in this world. The dog, too, Candy's old companion, shot because he's become useless, mirrors Lenny's fate. Mercy killing. Isolation. The cruel utilitarianism of a society that discards those who can no longer contribute. Even the river, at the beginning and end, is symbolic. It's peace and danger, refuge and grave. It's where Lenny hides and where his life ends. And through it all, Steinbeck holds a mirror to society, asking hard questions with quiet grace. What does it mean to belong? To protect? To dream? To fail? Of Mice and Men is short, just over 100 pages, but it carries the weight of centuries. It's as relevant now as it was in 1937, because the things it mourns, loneliness, poverty, exclusion, still haunt us. Because we still believe in rabbits, even when we shouldn't. The dust may have settled, but Of Mice and Men doesn't release you easily. It lingers, not with fire and fury, but with an aching, almost unbearable stillness. The kind that seeps into the bones, long after the book is closed. Now, we begin to pull at the deeper threads of Steinbeck's quiet masterpiece, beginning with his setting and structure, and why both matter far more than they might initially seem. Let's start with the land. California's Salinas Valley, lush, fertile, alive with promise. Steinbeck knew it intimately. He was born there, raised in its orchards and fields. And in this novella, he doesn't just set the story there. He roots it there, deep in its soil. Every breeze, every sunbeam, every crunch of gravel underfoot evokes a sense of real, tangible place. But beneath the natural beauty lies something colder: exploitation. This land, though rich, belongs to someone else. The men who work it, George, Lenny, Candy, crooks, own nothing. They labor day after day, moving from one ranch to the next, always outsiders, always temporary. The American dream is built on land, but here, land is something always out of reach. Steinbeck uses that bitter irony to underscore the novel's emotional weight. The closer George and Lenny seem to get to owning a piece of the dream, the more precarious it all becomes. Now consider the structure. As mentioned earlier, Of Mice and Men unfolds like a stage play. That's not accidental. Steinbeck originally intended the book to be a play novelette, a form that could work equally well on stage or in prose. That's why the settings are spare: a bunkhouse, a barn, a clearing by the river. The scenes follow a tightly controlled rhythm: arrival, complication, tension, release. This structural minimalism has a profound effect. It traps the characters in a kind of purgatory: no room to run, no chance for escape. Everything is compressed. Emotions swell in close quarters. The bunkhouse becomes a pressure cooker where resentment, fear, and loneliness simmer beneath the surface. And when those tensions finally erupt, when Curly's wife dies and Lenny flees, it feels inevitable. Not because of fate, but because the system, the structure, the world they live in gave them no other choice. And what about Steinbeck's language? It's deceptively simple. The prose is lean, muscular, without excess. But every word is doing heavy lifting. Dialogue isn't just speech, it's revelation. The way Candy hesitates before offering his life savings to join George and Lenny. The way Crooks stiffens when they enter his room. The way Curly's wife shifts between flirtation and fury, desperate to be seen. This economy of language gives of mice and men its emotional precision. There's no clutter, no flourish for flourish's sake. Just the raw, beating heart of human experience. And now we come to one of the novel's most resonant themes, loneliness. Steinbeck paints a world populated by men who are physically together, but emotionally isolated. Ranch life is transient. Friendships are rare. Trust is thin. Each man drifts through his days guarding his thoughts, his fears, his weaknesses. George and Lenny stand out precisely because they are not alone. Guys like us, that work on ranches, are the loneliest guys in the world, George says early on. But not us. Their companionship defies the norm. It gives them strength, hope, but it also makes them vulnerable. Because when you love someone, truly love them, you open yourself up to pain. And in Steinbeck's universe, that pain is almost always delivered. Candy has his dog. Crooks has his books. George has Lenny. And then he doesn't. The loneliness returns. Heavily. Permanently. It's in this sorrowful atmosphere that we must also revisit the idea of power, how it flows, who controls it, and how it corrupts. Curly is the most obvious example. He's the boss's son, entitled, aggressive, and secure. He wears a glove full of Vaseline to keep his hands soft for his wife, a grotesque display of fragile masculinity. But his power is illusory. He doesn't command respect, only fear. His attempts to assert dominance often backfire, as when Lenny crushes his hand. Curly's wife has even less power. She's not given a name, remember? Just an identity tied to a man who barely sees her. She wanders the ranch, searching for connection, but is met with suspicion, lust, and hostility. Her power lies only in her ability to threaten, and even that vanishes when she lets her guard down with Lenny. And Crooks, segregated, marginalized, bitter. He plays tough, but his isolation has eroded his soul. He tries to push Lenny away when the big man stumbles into his room. But when Lenny talks about the farm, about rabbits, again, Crooks allows himself to dream. For 1 minute. Then he crushes it. Because he knows it's not for him. Even Slim, the most respected man on the ranch, is powerless in the grander scheme. He's wise, yes. Compassionate. A moral compass in a cruel world. But he can't stop what happens to Lenny. He can only offer George comfort after the fact. This tapestry of power flawed, unjust, unkind, reflects the world Steinbeck lived in. The Great Depression didn't just ruin banks and stock markets. It shattered lives. It exposed the rot beneath America's promise. And it made survival a brutal, zero-sum game. Yet amid all this bleakness, Steinbeck plants a stubborn seed of hope. It's fragile, ridiculously fragile, but it's there. It's in the way George tells Lenny the story of the farm, over and over, like a prayer. It's in the moment when Candy joins their dream, offering his life savings. It's in the brief, shimmering instant when Crooks smiles and thinks, maybe I could join them. And yes, it all falls apart. But that doesn't mean it was meaningless. Because dreams, no matter how doomed, are what make us human. Steinbeck doesn't ask us to abandon hope. He asks us to understand it, to recognize its beauty and its burden, to carry it forward, even when the world tries to break it. That's why Of Mice and Men endures. Not because it's depressing, but because it's honest. Because it holds up a mirror to our struggles and reminds us that the yearning for connection, for dignity, for something better is universal. And that, sometimes, The smallest, softest dreams are the ones that matter most. We now step into the deeper, darker rooms of Mice and Men, and one of the most controversial yet essential elements, the death of Curly's wife. It's an event that shifts the entire story on its axis, propelling us toward the inevitable and tragic conclusion. But more than just a plot twist, her death is the convergence of many thematic undercurrents: gender, isolation, fear, power, and misunderstanding, all colliding in a single, breathless moment. Up until this point, Curly's wife has drifted in and out of scenes like a shadow. The men call her jailbait, a tart, a tramp. She is flirtatious, yes, but she is also trapped by her husband, by the ranch, by her role. She doesn't even get a name, and that absence is telling. She exists only in relation to Curly. She's his possession, his burden, his problem. But Steinbeck doesn't let her remain a flat caricature. No, he gives her a voice. Too late, perhaps, but when it comes, it reveals a soul starved of tenderness. When Lenny encounters her in the barn, it's after the puppy has died. He is distressed, confused. She enters, speaks gently to him, not out of malice, but out of a deep craving to be heard. In this brief exchange, she opens up. She speaks of how she could have been in the movies, of how a man once said she had talent, of how she ended up here, in the dust, beside a man who barely touches her. And then, the tragedy unfolds. She allows Lenny to stroke her hair. He's obsessed with softness, remember? With tactile comfort. But when she panics, when she pulls away, his fear kicks in, strong, childlike, unmanageable. And in trying to silence her cries, he shakes her. And she dies. Just like that. Steinbeck doesn't embellish the moment with melodrama. He lets it play out with chilling restraint. 1 minute she's alive, speaking of dreams and lost chances. The next, she's still, broken in the hay. Why does this moment matter so profoundly? Because it marks the death not just of a character, but of the dream of the farm, the rabbits, the safety, the togetherness. It all dies with her. Lenny's strength, once a source of innocent hope, becomes an uncontrollable force of destruction. And there's no going back. George knows it. Candy knows it. Even Slim knows it. The moment they find her body, the light dims. And now, let's pause on that phrase, the death of the dream. Steinbeck crafts a story where dreams are not just things characters want. They are the very reason they endure. George and Lenny's vision of the farm is more than fantasy. It is ritual, repeated like a hymn, a symbol of autonomy, of freedom, of human dignity. Candy joins in, offering not just his savings, but his hope. Crooks momentarily believes he might be welcome too. For a short, glowing window of time, the impossible feels just within reach. But reality intrudes, as it so often does. Steinbeck shows us how fragile dreams can be when they are built on unstable ground, on poverty, on inequality, on people with no power to protect them. Lenny's actions aren't evil. They are tragic. He doesn't understand. He doesn't mean to kill. But meaning doesn't save the dream. The consequences are final. Candy's reaction to Curly's wife's death is especially wrenching. He stares down at her body, then back at George, and says, "You goddamn tramp. You done it, didn't you? I suppose you're glad. Everybody knowed you'd mess things up." But the anger quickly fades, and what follows is even sadder. "You and me can still get that little place, can't we, George?" And George says nothing. That silence is the death knell. But Steinbeck is not simply killing a dream for shock value. He's exposing a pattern that haunted America during the Great Depression, The way systemic inequality crushes even the gentlest hopes. People weren't just poor, they were powerless. And when people have no power, dreams die violently, suddenly, and often without warning. Curly's wife is an example of that too. She dreamed of something bigger, of lights, scripts, applause. Instead, she's stuck in a barn, married to a man who treats her like livestock. Her fate is not Lenny's fault alone. It is society's fault. A society that gave her no choices, no respect, no escape. So what happens after her death? A manhunt. The men gather. Curly grabs his shotgun. Lenny flees to the only place he knows. Back to the brush, the clearing by the river. The place George told him to go if anything bad ever happened. This moment sharpens Steinbeck's larger philosophical blade. When the world offers no protection for innocence, the innocent run. But there is no refuge anymore. Not really. George knows Lenny won't survive. If Curly finds him, it won't be an arrest. It'll be brutal revenge. George's decision becomes clear, but no less devastating. He must reach Lenny first, and do what no one else can do: give him peace. Before we reach that harrowing end, let's reflect on the symbolism of Lenny's strength. Lenny is powerful, physically, almost mythically strong, but he has no control over that strength. He loves soft things, mice, puppies, velvet, but doesn't understand fragility. He crushes without intent, kills without malice. His hands are not weapons, they are misunderstood instruments. And through this, Steinbeck crafts a heartbreaking contradiction: a man too gentle for the world, and too dangerous to remain in it. It's worth noting that Lenny's name, Lenny Small, is itself a subtle irony. He is anything but small, not in form, not in emotion. But in the eyes of the world, in the cold machinery of society, he is less than. A problem, a burden, a mistake. And yet, George sees him as more than a friend, more than a responsibility. Lenny is George's last link to humanity, the person who reminds him of decency, loyalty, and love. And George, in turn, is Lenny's anchor, his guide, his protector. The only thing standing between him and a world that does not forgive accidents. That's what makes the final decision, George's act of mercy, all the more shattering. But we'll get there soon. For now, let's let the dust settle in the barn. Let the silence deepen. The dream is dead. The characters are moving, unknowingly, toward the inevitable. The light is fading fast. The sun is beginning to sink now, and we return to the riverbank, the very place where everything began. Lenny has made it there, just like George told him. The brush rustles softly with the breeze, the water glimmers in the dimming light, and somewhere in the distance, the sound of men shouting grows faint, then louder again. This is not just a return to a location. It's a return to innocence, to the last shred of safety in Lenny's crumbling world. He crouches there, waiting, hiding. But Steinbeck does something remarkable here. He lets us into Lenny's mind. And what we find is not chaos or fear, but hallucinations. Imagined voices. The ghost of his Aunt Clara. A giant rabbit, speaking with accusation. Lenny's subconscious becomes the battleground. Aunt Clara scolds him in that familiar, maternal tone, shaming him for how he's treated George, for all the trouble he's caused. Then the rabbit, his dream incarnate, taunts him, tells him George will beat him, leave him, lock him in a cage. This is Lenny's mind trying to make sense of a world that never made sense to him. He understands, in his own way, that he's done something unforgivable, but he can't quite grasp the full scale. His guilt is shaped by fear of abandonment, not fear of justice. And here is where George enters. Quietly, rifle hidden, face heavy with a burden too great for any man. He sees Lenny and calls out gently, as if nothing has changed. As if they're just two men sitting by the river, waiting for supper. Lenny lights up, happy to see his friend. His voice is full of childlike joy. George sits beside him, tells him to look out across the water, to imagine the dream one last time. And here, in what may be the most emotionally wrecking scene in American literature, George begins to describe the farm again. The rabbits, the alfalfa, the quiet, peaceful life. Lenny listens with rapture, as if he's already there. His breathing slows. His smile softens. And as George describes the future they'll never have, he raises the gun. He steadies it behind Lenny's head, and he pulls the trigger. Lenny dies with the dream in his ears. No fear, no punishment, only peace. This is where Steinbeck's genius strikes hardest. He crafts a mercy killing that is both morally impossible and undeniably right. George spares Lenny the pain of capture, of violence at the hands of Curly and the men. But in doing so, he gives up the last part of himself that was still innocent. This is not just a tragedy. It is an obliteration of hope. The death of what little remained of decency in a brutal world. George doesn't just lose Lenny. He loses the dream, the purpose, the reason he kept going. When the men arrive, Slim is the only one who seems to understand. "You hadda, George," he says quietly. "I swear you hadda." And then, that quiet line that breaks the reader. "Come on, George. Me and you'll go in and get a drink." Because that's all that's left. The pain, the numbness, and a long walk back to a life without meaning. Now let's pull back and look at the broader meaning of this final scene. Lenny's death is not a punishment, it is a release. And George's action, though harrowing, is a final act of love. The parallel to Candy and his old dog is intentional. Earlier in the book, when Carlson shot the dog, Candy was full of regret. He tells George, "I shouldn't have let no stranger shoot my dog." George learns from that. He won't let someone else in Lenny's life in fear and hate. He will do it himself, with love, even if it destroys him. But this scene also acts as Steinbeck's indictment of the American dream itself. Remember how many characters dreamed of something better? Candy dreamed of the farm and companionship. Crooks dreamed of dignity and equality. Curly's wife dreamed of fame and identity. George and Lenny dreamed of rabbits and safety. And in the end, all dreams are shattered. Why? Because the world Steinbeck writes is one where the marginalized, the poor, the disabled, the outcast do not get to achieve dreams. They survive. Barely. They compromise. They endure. In Steinbeck's America, the dream is not dead because it was false. It's dead because the world crushes those who try to reach for it without power. This final scene also reinforces the novel's cyclical structure. We end where we began. The river, the brush, the quiet. It is a deliberate loop, emphasizing the futility of escape. Just as the opening chapter lulled us with calm before the tension began, the final chapter returns to calm, this time, permanent, irreversible calm. And if we listen carefully to Steinbeck's structure, we notice something else. The novel moves like a slow, tragic heartbeat. Tension, release. Hope, destruction. Comfort, death. It mirrors life during the Great Depression, brief moments of promise followed by brutal reminders of reality. Steinbeck doesn't offer redemption. He offers recognition. He forces us to look closely at a society that isolates people, that punishes weakness, that destroys the very things that make us human. George is not a hero. Lenny is not a villain. Curly's wife is not just a victim, and Slim is not just wise. Every character is flawed, real, human, and that, ultimately, is what makes of Mice and Men so devastating and so enduring. Because we see ourselves in it, in George's burden, in Lenny's confusion, in Candy's desperation, in Crooks's bitterness, in Curly's wife's loneliness, and yes, even in Curly's rage. Steinbeck doesn't give us answers. He gives us a mirror, and that mirror doesn't flinch. The novel closes not with hope, but with silence, with George walking away, with the dream evaporated, with the soft murmur of the river washing away all that came before. It's brutal, but it's honest, and maybe that's what we need most. The story has ended, but the weight it leaves behind only begins to settle in. As George walks away from the riverbank, the dream still echoing in the air, we begin to unravel the deeper threads Steinbeck wove into this heartbreak. The novel may appear short, simple even, but within its compact structure lies a literary bombshell of loneliness, disillusionment, and brutal honesty about the human condition. Let's step gently into the first layers of this analysis, not as critics tearing apart the narrative, but as listeners, absorbing the hum beneath the words. First, loneliness. Every character in Of Mice and Men is isolated, cut off, severed from connection in a world that demands survival over sympathy. The ranch is no paradise. It's a transient purgatory, a place where men drift in and out with no roots, no families, no permanence. George and Lenny's bond is an anomaly. In fact, the other ranch hands are suspicious of it. Slim remarks, "A guy don't never get no chance to be alone with another guy." And Crooks, bitter and observant, points out, "A guy needs somebody to be near him." These lines aren't just passing thoughts. They're quiet screams in the silence of the novel. Candy, with his missing hand and ancient dog, represents the elderly, the discarded. Crooks, living in forced solitude because of his race, represents the alienated. Curly's wife, unnamed and unloved, is a symbol of the invisibility women often suffer under patriarchal systems. Even Curly, with his bravado and threats, is lonely in his own twisted way, hungry for dominance, not because of strength, but fear. The ranch becomes a theater of isolation. Everyone wants something they can't have: connection, respect, safety, belonging. But instead, they're left with suspicion, prejudice, and the slow rot of unfulfilled dreams. Then we come to the dream itself. This dream, the little farm, the rabbits, the self-sustaining life, it's almost childish in its simplicity. But that's what makes it so powerful. It's not just a fantasy. It's the antidote to the crushing, daily grind of powerlessness. It's a pocket of warmth in a cold world. But here's Steinbeck's gut punch. The dream is always out of reach. Always. Candy wants in. Crooks dares to hope, just for a second. Even Curly's wife, in her own way, clings to the dream of becoming a movie star, someone wanted, admired, known. But each time, Steinbeck pulls it away, like a cruel magician snapping a coin out of a child's hand. The dream is never meant to be realized, not because it isn't good, but because the world they live in does not allow it. Let's also reflect on how Steinbeck constructs the characters to reflect archetypes, but always subverts them. George is the protector, but he fails. Lenny is innocent, but dangerous. Candy is old, but still yearning. Curly's wife is flirtatious, but deeply broken. Slim is noble, yet passive. Crooks is intelligent, yet caged. Nothing and no one is simple. Steinbeck's prose reflects this complexity too. His writing is sparse, stripped down. The dialogue is authentic to the time, unembellished and plain-spoken. But that simplicity is deceptive. Beneath it, there's rhythm, there's precision. Each word is chosen with the care of a poet. Notice how often Steinbeck uses light and shadow. When we first meet Curly's wife, She's bathed in sunlight that slants across her face. When she dies, the light lies on her half-covered face, soft and unreal. There's something almost cinematic about the way Steinbeck uses physical light to track emotional moments. Joy, tension, death, they're all choreographed with weather, light, and space. Even the setting itself becomes a character. The bunkhouse is claustrophobic, full of suspicion. Crooks's quarters are isolated, filled with broken pride. The barn is vast, but empty. Death happens here. And the riverbank is both cradle and coffin. It welcomes and ends. It's nature's stage for Lenny's gentle beginning and tragic end. Let's not forget the symbolic weight of the animals, either. The old dog, shot for being useless. Lenny's obsession with petting soft things, leading to death. The puppy, killed by accident. These creatures parallel the characters. Used, abused, discarded when inconvenient. The message? In this world, weakness is fatal. Now, deeper still, the moral paradox of George's final act. He kills the man he loves. He kills to save him. In most stories, love saves the day. In Steinbeck's story, love carries the gun. And yet, we don't judge George. We ache for him. Because Steinbeck has done something remarkable. He has shown us a moral act that cannot be justified or condemned. It simply is. This is the ache of reality. Steinbeck's moral vision is clear. In a society that devours the weak, even mercy is violent. George's action doesn't end suffering. It transfers it. From Lenny to George. From innocence to burden. It's also worth noting how the book's title frames the entire narrative. Of Mice and Men comes from Robert Burns's poem. The best laid schemes, oh mice and men. Gang aft agley. Or in modern English, plans often go wrong. It's the perfect title. Everyone in the novel has a plan, a dream, a fragile hope, and every one of them is undone. Not because they didn't try, but because life, especially for the poor, the broken, the voiceless, rarely respects plans. Steinbeck wasn't just writing a story. He was holding a mirror to 1930s America, to the broken promises of the American dream, to the way capitalism commodifies people, judges them by productivity, not humanity. Lenny isn't a threat until he becomes a liability. Then he is expendable. And George? He becomes the agent of that system, forced to do what society would have done anyway, only with a gentler hand. In the end, Of Mice and Men is a portrait of failed utopia. Not a political one, but a personal one. A vision of friendship, belonging, simplicity, and peace that is doomed not because it's wrong, but because the world is too harsh to let it live. Steinbeck gives us no heroes, no villains, no triumph. Only truth. And sometimes, truth hurts more than fiction ever could. So if you're feeling heavy now, good. You're supposed to. Let it sink in. Let it rest beside you like the stillness of the river after the final ripple fades. Moving forward from the heavy truth of Mice and Men, let's delve deeper into the characters themselves, their complexity, contradictions, and the way Steinbeck uses them as vessels to explore profound human truths. George Milton, at first glance, is the archetypal caretaker, small, sharp, quick-witted, a man who has sacrificed much to protect Lenny. But beneath that practical exterior lies a man caught in a constant struggle between hope and despair. George is the anchor in the swirling storm of Lenny's innocence and strength. His protectiveness is a thread of loyalty that runs through the harsh fabric of their lives, yet he is haunted by moments of frustration, even cruelty. He knows the impossibility of their dream, but nurtures it nonetheless, almost as a survival mechanism. It's a bittersweet contradiction. He loves Lenny, but sometimes longs for freedom from the burden of responsibility. Lenny Small is perhaps the most tragic figure Steinbeck created. His physical strength is colossal, but his mental and emotional capacity is childlike. Lenny's obsession with soft things, the rabbits, the puppy, even Curly's wife's hair, represents a yearning for tenderness and safety in a world that offers neither. Lenny is simultaneously a source of hope and danger. He embodies innocence destroyed by circumstance and misunderstanding. Steinbeck's writing invites us to feel empathy for Lenny, to mourn the cruelty that life inflicts on those who are different or vulnerable. The tragic irony is that Lenny's very nature dooms him, despite his pure intentions. Candy, the old swamper with his missing hand, is a symbol of aging and obsolescence. His attachment to his old dog, a creature considered useless and a burden, parallels his own fear of becoming disposable. Candy's eagerness to join George and Lenny's dream farm speaks to a universal human desire to belong, to find security, and to leave a legacy. Yet Candy's story is tinged with melancholy. His hope seems fragile against the relentless march of time and societal disregard for the weak. Crooks, the black stable hand, carries the heavy burden of racial segregation and loneliness. Steinbeck gives him sharp wit and intelligence, but Crooks lives in enforced isolation, barred from the camaraderie that the other men share. His interactions reveal the intersection of race, class, and loneliness during the Great Depression. When he momentarily entertains the idea of joining the dream farm, his cynicism and hurtfulness emerge, reflecting a lifetime of rejection. Crooks embodies the societal structures that divide people and rob them of their humanity. Curly's wife, often dismissed as a mere troublemaker or temptress, is a profoundly lonely character trapped by her gender and social position. She is nameless throughout the novel, a deliberate choice by Steinbeck that reflects her lack of identity and power. Her flirtations and provocations are desperate cries for attention and validation. The dream of Hollywood stardom that she clings to symbolizes a hope for escape, for a life beyond the confines of the ranch and her marriage. Her death is tragic not only because it ends the story's tension, but because it represents the destruction of that hope. Slim, the mule driver, stands out as a figure of quiet authority and respect. He is the only character who seems fully at ease in the harsh world of the ranch, a man who commands admiration through empathy rather than force. Slim's understanding of the human condition and his acceptance of George's final decision position him as a moral compass in the novel. His role is subtle but vital, embodying the rare kindness that can exist even in cruelty's shadow. Curly, the boss's aggressive son, is a study in insecurity and power. His small stature and combative nature hint at deep-seated fears. He wields violence to assert dominance, but is ultimately ineffective and pitiable. Curly's confrontations, especially with Lenny, serve as catalysts for the novel's tragic climax. He represents toxic masculinity and the destructive need to prove oneself through force. Through these characters, Steinbeck paints a vivid picture of human frailty and resilience. They are not heroes in the traditional sense. They do not achieve grand victories or transcend their circumstances. Instead, they endure, dream, stumble, and sometimes fall. Their stories are stitched together by shared hardship and fleeting moments of connection. Stylistically, Steinbeck's use of dialogue is masterful. The conversations are clipped, real, and often reveal more through what's left unsaid than spoken aloud. The vernacular speech captures the rhythm and texture of working-class life, grounding the story in its historical and social context. The language, while simple, resonates deeply, allowing readers to hear the voices of a forgotten America. Moreover, Steinbeck's narrative structure, with its cyclical patterns starting and ending at the riverbank, emphasizes the inescapability of fate. The story loops back on itself, reinforcing the idea that despite dreams and desires, the characters remain trapped in their circumstances. In the end, Steinbeck's characters and his precise, evocative writing invite us to reflect on universal themes: friendship, loneliness, the pursuit of dreams, and the harsh realities that often crush them. They remind us that even in the bleakest settings, the human spirit persists, imperfect, fragile, but enduring. As we continue to explore Of Mice and Men, it's time to unpack the novel's deeper themes, those timeless threads that weave through the narrative and resonate beyond its Depression-era setting, inviting us to contemplate the human condition itself. One of the most pervasive themes in Steinbeck's work is loneliness, a palpable, almost physical presence that seeps through the characters' interactions and silences. The ranch is a microcosm of isolation, where men drift from place to place, severed from families, friendships, and roots. This itinerant lifestyle breeds disconnection and despair. Steinbeck doesn't just depict loneliness as mere solitude. It's a profound existential loneliness, where characters struggle to be seen, heard, and understood. Candy's old dog, isolated and discarded, becomes a metaphor for the fate that awaits those deemed useless. Crooks's segregated quarters are a stark reminder of societal exclusion. Curly's wife's desperate flirtations underscore her alienation within a patriarchal world. The dream of the farm, a simple patch of land where freedom, security, and self-sufficiency reign, is another powerful theme, symbolizing hope and the pursuit of happiness. For George and Lenny, the dream isn't just about owning property. It's a vision of belonging and stability, a sanctuary from the harshness of their transient lives. This dream binds the characters together and propels them forward, even when reality offers little reason for hope. Yet Steinbeck's portrayal of this dream is nuanced. The farm is both an aspiration and a fragile illusion, something that sustains but ultimately cannot be fully attained. This tension between hope and futility permeates the novel. Powerlessness and vulnerability emerge vividly through Steinbeck's portrayal of social hierarchies. The character's powerlessness, whether due to age, race, gender, or disability, is a poignant reminder of the rigid social structures that limit opportunity and freedom. Candy's missing hand, Crooks's race, Curly's wife's gender, and Lenny's mental disability all mark them as outsiders. Their struggles highlight the ways society marginalizes and dehumanizes those who don't fit the dominant mold. Steinbeck invites us to question these injustices and consider the dignity of every individual, regardless of their place in the hierarchy. Another theme closely linked to powerlessness is friendship and loyalty. In a world defined by loneliness and struggle, the bond between George and Lenny shines as a rare and precious beacon. Their friendship defies the loneliness that traps others, illustrating the human need for connection. Yet, it is also fraught with complexity, as George's protective role is tinged with burden and sacrifice. Steinbeck paints friendship not as uncomplicated or idealized, but as a messy, necessary, and sometimes painful reality. Violence and fate interlace throughout the novel, underscoring the fragility of human plans. Violence, whether physical or emotional, erupts inevitably, often fueled by fear, frustration, or misunderstanding. Curly's aggressive provocations and Lenny's unintentional destructive acts serve as tragic turning points. Steinbeck's narrative suggests that these eruptions are not anomalies but intrinsic to the character's environment and nature. Fate, then, becomes an unavoidable force, a silent hand guiding the characters toward inevitable outcomes despite their hopes and efforts. The novel's circular structure and foreshadowing reinforce this sense of inescapable destiny. The theme of the American dream itself receives a critical treatment. Steinbeck exposes the dream's darker side, showing how it is often unattainable for many, especially during the Great Depression. The dream's promise of equality and prosperity contrasts starkly with the harsh economic realities that define the characters' lives. Steinbeck's portrayal is neither cynical nor naive. Rather, it invites reflection on the nature of dreams and the societal conditions that hinder or nurture them. Underlying all these themes is Steinbeck's humanism, a profound empathy for his characters and their plight. He neither judges nor patronizes, but offers a compassionate lens that reveals the dignity in struggle and the complexity of human motives. This humanism is why the novel remains powerful and relevant. It speaks to our shared vulnerabilities, hopes, and fears. As we explore these themes, it's clear that Of Mice and Men is not merely a story about itinerant workers or a historical snapshot of the 1930s. It is a meditation on the universal aspects of humanity, the longing for connection, the pain of exclusion, the tension between hope and despair, and the fragile nature of dreams. Steinbeck's exploration of these themes invites readers to see beyond the surface, to recognize the profound humanity in each character, and to reflect on the social forces that shape and often limit human lives. It's a call to empathy, a reminder that every individual carries dreams and fears, that loneliness can be crushing, and that friendship, when found, is a treasure. As the story moves toward its climax, Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men sharpens its focus on the characters' personal struggles and the consequences of their dreams colliding with harsh reality. The novel's tension escalates, and the fragile balance that George and Lenny have maintained begins to unravel. Curly's wife, a character whose presence looms large despite relatively little page time, becomes central in this section. She is a study in loneliness and thwarted aspirations, trapped in a loveless marriage and a world that limits her identity to a mere possession of her husband. Steinbeck's portrayal is both critical and empathetic. She is neither a villain nor a victim in a simplistic sense, but a deeply flawed, human figure shaped by her circumstances. Her desperate attempts to connect with the men on the ranch reveal a profound isolation that mirrors the loneliness experienced by other characters. The pivotal scene where Curly's wife confronts Crooks, Candy, and Lenny in the stable highlights the intersections of race, gender, and powerlessness. Crooks, the only black man on the ranch, has endured a lifetime of exclusion and humiliation. His initial bitter defensiveness softens when he listens to Curly's wife's monologue about her own shattered dreams, exposing the complex layers of isolation affecting all marginalized individuals. This scene underscores Steinbeck's critique of social hierarchies and prejudices. No matter their differences, these characters share a common human desire for dignity and companionship. Lenny's interaction with Curly's wife shortly thereafter is both tragic and inevitable. His innocent but overwhelming strength, combined with his inability to understand social cues and consequences, leads to a fatal accident. This moment crystallizes the novel's themes of vulnerability and fate, the unpredictable consequences of innocence in a world that punishes difference and weakness. The death of Curly's wife marks the collapse of George and Lenny's dream. It shatters the fragile hope that had sustained them and accelerates the tragic momentum toward the novel's conclusion. For George, the event is devastating. His protective role is thrust into a painful new light as he grapples with the impossible choice ahead. Steinbeck's depiction of this sequence is striking in its restraint and quiet intensity. There is no melodrama, no sensationalism, just the raw unfolding of consequences shaped by forces beyond the character's control. This careful narrative choice amplifies the emotional impact and invites the reader to consider the broader implications, the cost of dreams in a world structured by cruelty and indifference. The escalating tension in this section also illuminates the fragile nature of human plans. Despite George's efforts to shield Lenny and preserve their future, the forces of society and circumstance conspire to undo them. The novel's somber tone and mounting suspense reveal the fragility of hope and the harsh realities confronting those who dream. Moreover, Steinbeck's narrative voice subtly emphasizes the cyclical nature of tragedy, reminding us that the story of George and Lenny is part of a larger human pattern of striving and loss. The novel's close-knit structure, with its circular motifs and repeated imagery, reinforces this idea, offering a meditation on fate, chance, and the limits of human control. At the heart of this section is also the moral complexity of George's role. His decision to take responsibility for Lenny's fate weighs heavily, revealing the burdens of loyalty and love. Steinbeck challenges readers to confront uncomfortable questions about mercy, justice, and the nature of protection in an unforgiving world. This portion of the novel is pivotal. It shifts from the hopeful to the tragic, from the dream to the inevitable. Steinbeck's delicate balance between character, theme, and plot here deepens our understanding of the novel's core messages about human fragility, societal constraints, and the elusive quest for belonging. As the narrative drives toward its conclusion, the reader is drawn ever more closely into the emotional and philosophical heart of Mice and Men, the enduring questions about what it means to be human, the price of dreams, and the harsh realities that define our lives. In the wake of the tragedy, Steinbeck's narrative grows quieter, more introspective. The ranch and its inhabitants continue their routines, but a shadow hangs over everything, an unspoken tension that permeates the air. This section explores the aftermath of Curly's wife's death and the characters' responses, highlighting the theme of inevitability and the cyclical nature of despair. George's burden becomes clearer here. He understands that the dream he once shared with Lenny has been irrevocably broken. The vision of their own land, a place where they could be free and safe, now feels painfully distant, almost like a cruel illusion. Yet, George remains resolute in protecting Lenny, knowing that the outside world will not show mercy. Candy's grief is poignant and tangible. The loss of Curly's wife not only extinguishes the hope of the farm, but also brings to light his own fears about aging and uselessness. His earlier enthusiasm for the dream is replaced by a heavy resignation, underscoring the vulnerability of those without power or youth in a harsh economic landscape. Candy's character embodies the precariousness of human dreams when faced with the brutal realities of survival. The ranch hand's reactions reveal much about the social dynamics and collective mindset. Curly, driven by anger and pride, seeks vengeance, while others maintain a wary silence, knowing that confrontation could lead to disaster. The absence of open dialogue mirrors the broader societal repression of emotions and the rigid social codes that govern behavior, particularly among men who must display toughness at all costs. Crooks's character, previously marginalized, becomes a symbol of quiet endurance. His isolation, compounded by racial discrimination, offers a sobering reminder of the systemic injustices that shape individual destinies. Steinbeck uses Crooks's perspective to critique social exclusion and to deepen the reader's empathy for those who suffer invisibly. Meanwhile, Lenny's fate looms closer. The innocent, childlike quality that defines him is contrasted sharply with the deadly consequences of his actions. His dependence on George and his limited understanding of the world heightened the tragic dimension of the narrative. Lenny is not merely a victim of circumstance, but also a mirror reflecting society's failure to accommodate difference and vulnerability. Steinbeck's prose in this section is stripped down, reflecting the starkness of the situation. The naturalistic detail, the dust settling, the quiet wind, the stillness of the ranch, creates a somber atmosphere that amplifies the emotional weight without overt sentimentality. This restrained style invites readers to feel the loss and tension viscerally rather than being told how to feel. The narrative also revisits motifs introduced earlier: the dream of the farm, the image of the rabbits, and the recurring reference to loneliness. These elements serve as anchors, reminding us of the character's desires and disappointments. They reinforce the novel's meditation on the human condition, the longing for connection, and the frequent disappointment of that longing. In this section, Steinbeck deepens the philosophical core of the novel. He challenges the reader to consider the cost of mercy and the limits of justice in an unforgiving world. The complexity of George's position, caught between love and duty, hope and despair, elicits a nuanced emotional response that defies simple categorization. The unfolding events prompt reflection on the nature of friendship and sacrifice. George's decisions highlight the paradoxes of loyalty, how protection can sometimes mean making the hardest, most painful choices. This adds layers to the novel's exploration of human relationships, emphasizing their fragility and the moral ambiguity that often accompanies acts of care. Overall, this section marks the turning point from the narrative's rising action to its inevitable conclusion. The emotional stakes are highest here, and Steinbeck's craftsmanship is evident in his ability to sustain tension while maintaining a quiet, reflective tone. The reader is left anticipating the final resolution, aware of the tragic trajectory yet compelled by the depth of feeling and insight. As the story moves forward, the themes of loss, loneliness, and shattered dreams become ever more poignant, inviting a deeper understanding of the human spirit and the societal forces that shape it. As the story approaches its conclusion, the tension tightens into an inevitable crescendo, and George faces the heartbreaking final choice. This section delves into the climax and resolution of Mice and Men, examining how Steinbeck carefully constructs a scene that is both deeply tragic and hauntingly compassionate. George and Lenny find themselves back at the clearing by the river, the same spot where the novel opened. This circular structure underscores the cyclical nature of their journey, as well as the futility of their dreams within the harsh world they inhabit. The scene is serene yet charged with quiet dread, with nature providing a stark contrast to the human turmoil about to unfold. The gentle sounds of the river and the soft rustling of leaves almost lull the listener into a false sense of peace. George's decision to end Lenny's life himself is an act loaded with moral complexity. He wants to spare Lenny from a brutal fate at the hands of the angry mob led by Curly, knowing that Lenny cannot survive in a world that neither understands nor forgives him. This act of mercy is suffused with profound sadness, loyalty, and a deep sense of responsibility. George's calm storytelling of their shared dream, moments before pulling the trigger, is a tender farewell, a way to give Lenny peace in his final moments. The scene is powerful because it challenges the conventional notions of justice and mercy. George's act, though tragic, is presented not as a crime, but as a painful necessity, the last kindness he can offer. This blurring of moral lines makes the reader question the nature of right and wrong in a world that often offers only harsh choices. Lenny's death is portrayed with restraint and sensitivity. There is no sensationalism, no dramatic outburst, only the quiet inevitability of an ending long foreseen. Steinbeck's choice to focus on the internal emotions of George, rather than graphic detail, invites empathy and reflection on the fragility of life and the costs of compassion. The aftermath is almost shockingly mundane. Candy and Crooks discover George's actions and are left to grapple with the sudden loss and the shattering of their shared dream. Curly's wrath is momentarily quelled, and the remaining men return to their routines. This return to normalcy emphasizes the loneliness and isolation that persists despite the dramatic events. The novel closes with a sense of melancholy resignation. The dream of independence, freedom, and friendship is once again lost, reinforcing the theme of unattainable hope. Steinbeck leaves the reader with a lingering sense of injustice, but also with a deep understanding of the human need for connection and the sacrifices that love sometimes demands. This ending echoes the broader social realities of the 1930s, the despair of the Great Depression, the harshness of rural life, and the limited options available to those on the margins. The novel's unresolved tensions remind us that the struggles of its characters are not isolated but part of a larger human condition. Stylistically, Steinbeck's final pages maintain the novel's characteristic blend of simplicity and depth. His prose remains straightforward yet poetic, capturing the quiet dignity of his characters even in the face of tragedy. This restraint enhances the emotional impact, making the conclusion feel inevitable yet profoundly moving. Overall, this section crystallizes the core themes of Mice and Men: the fragility of dreams, the complexity of human relationships, and the often cruel realities of life. It invites readers to contemplate the difficult moral decisions we face and the ways in which love and protection can intersect with loss. Now that we have journeyed through the entirety of Mice and Men, it is time to slow down, soften the pace, and gently reflect on the profound layers this novella offers. The story may have ended in tragedy, but its echo lingers, inviting us to sit with its questions and feelings long after the last page is turned. Imagine yourself back in that quiet clearing beside the river. The evening is falling, the air cools softly, and a gentle breeze whispers through the leaves. The dream George and Lenny shared, that fragile hope for a better life, feels like a distant flicker, like the last ember of a dying fire. Yet, it also reminds us of something essential about humanity: the desire for connection, safety, and a place to call home. Steinbeck's tale is not merely about the hardships of two itinerant workers in the Great Depression. It is a mirror reflecting our own struggles with loneliness, belonging, and the pursuit of happiness. His characters are not heroes in the traditional sense. They are vulnerable, flawed, and profoundly human. George's protective loyalty, Lenny's innocent but dangerous strength, Candy's longing for purpose, and Crooks's bitter isolation all invite us to feel a deep empathy for people who might otherwise be invisible in society. This story asks us to consider what it means to dream, to hope, and ultimately, to confront the realities that may crush those dreams. Yet within this harsh truth, there is beauty, a beauty found in the tenderness of friendship and the courage to keep dreaming despite the odds. The writing itself carries a gentle, rhythmic quality, like a lullaby that soothes while it unsettles. Steinbeck's language is simple but packed with emotional weight, allowing the reader to see, hear, and feel the world through the eyes of these characters. His use of nature as a backdrop contrasts the brutality of the human experience with moments of calm and peace, reminding us that life is complex and never entirely dark or light. As you settle into sleep tonight, let the story's quiet melancholy and hopeful yearning wash over you. Let it remind you that dreams, no matter how fragile, give our lives meaning, and that sometimes the greatest kindness is found in the hardest choices. So take a deep breath, feel the softness of the night, and rest easy knowing that stories like this one continue to speak to the heart of what it means to be human, imperfect, hopeful, and deeply connected. Sweet dreams.